It's 11 o'clock, everybody. So we're going to get started here. Welcome to the webinar today, Getting the Right Gear, Esports Edition. Um, a couple of things to just kind of housekeeping things to talk about before we get going here. The chat and the Q&A functions should both be up and running. Feel free to type out any questions that you have throughout the hour here and dump them in there. And we'll get to them as we roll along, and then there will be an opportunity at the end to also go over questions if we don't cover what you're interested in. With that, the other good thing is if you want to watch the replay of today's webinar, we are recording, so it'll go on our YouTube channel, most likely this afternoon or early tomorrow morning, and then we're going to email out the link to everybody that registered. So if you missed something or want to come back, we'll have that available at like I said, either later today or early tomorrow. So let's get going here. Super quick introduction. My name's Josh. I am the Gravity Gaming Solutions Director here at Bytespeed. I've been here since 2019, and before that, I actually started my esports career at the University of Jamestown, a small NAIA college in the middle of North Dakota. I guess they're Division II now, so that's a little different. But we started one of the first 20 varsity esports programs back in 2016. We were kind of part of that first wave of collegiate esports where schools were building out varsity programs with scholarships and dedicated facilities. And we were pretty early on in that kind of initial start with the collegiate scene. So I did that for 3 years. I was actually a Bytespeed customer during that time. So we got all of our tech from Bytespeed, and I got to know the crew there really well, and actually came aboard in 2019 for my current role. Um, Over the course of the last 10 years, I've been lucky enough to serve on a couple advisory boards. In 2018, I jumped on with NACAD, that's the National Association of Esports Coaches and Directors. So that's the National Coaches Org. Highly recommend getting involved with that. They've got a lot of great content for kind of just how you do the day-to-day job of running your esports program. And they're actually doing a kind of a revamp to their certification process. The beta for that is open now. It's a lot of great information, especially if you're not familiar with kind of the esports world or coaching or any of those things. So I did that for about 6 years. And then in 2022, I jumped on with the Marshalltown Community College down in Iowa. It's a really cool 2 year school that's doing some awesome things on the academic side of esports. And we meet, a couple times a semester to kind of, as industry leaders and other representatives from around the country, to kind of help steer that program. So I don't do anything esports day to day besides my job here at Bytespeed, but I still get to scratch that itch a little bit with MCC. So I've had a really amazing time in esports over the last almost 10 years. And, hopefully some of that knowledge and experience can translate to answering questions and kind of helping you guys out start your own programs. So that's enough about me. This is why we're all here today, right? Is how do we build this? I think we have this kind of stereotypical view of what an esports program or a facility could look like. But there's a lot of steps between selecting a room to actually getting equipment in place, teams playing, and off to the races. This is a college down in Alabama, Huntington College. They actually took an old theater, revamped it into their space, and I think one of my favorite esports facilities that we've ever helped with. But they look like a lot of different every school's facility can look different and will look different. And so just because this worked for Huntington doesn't mean that that's what we can do in our school or at our university. So we kind of want to talk about the steps to get there and how you can apply kind of the thought process that they use and how we talk to folks to getting yourself up and running. So this is the vision and the goal, and we'll hopefully try and lay the groundwork to get you there. Before we talk about equipment and space planning and all that kind of stuff, I like to kind of start the conversation with like why esports in general, right? There are a million different reasons why schools are adding esports, and a lot of it comes down to giving more opportunities for our students, right? Student engagement is something that we know improves outcomes educationally, socially, emotionally, all those types of things. And there's a lot of opportunities out there that are taken advantage every day by students who love sports and love fine art stuff. So, like, I was a two sport athlete in high school, ran track in college, but I also did, speech and theater and FBLA and all these other great activities. But there are a lot of students that don't do anything. Their interests aren't in those kind of standard offerings. And then when a school kind of talks about, hey, we're adding an esports program, that's their thing. There's a stat out there that, through some data collection over the years, at like roughly 65% of all students that participate in esports, that's their only student activity. So their only opportunity to learn those team skills, to work with their peers, to grow their social circle, that's coming from esports and gaming, and that's it. So being able to go to those students and say, "Hey, we've got a home for you," I think is super important. And at the high school level, that's been definitely like the driving factor of getting those kids more engaged with their education, giving them a reason to care and to show up and to participate beyond just, hey, I'm a warm body in the classroom because I have to be here. Giving them kind of that like incentive helps give them a reason to care. And I think that that's a really awesome thing. On the collegiate side and even on the high school side too, recruitment and retention, those are two big reasons why you start a program. I myself, when we started at Jamestown, we looked at it as an enrollment driver, a way to open the door to a college education for students that might not be able to do that with scholarship money and those type of things. So how do we bring new students to campus, and how do we keep them here and make sure they graduate? And the list goes on and on and on. So I think it's, something that as long as you have a clear goal about like why you want to build your program, whether it is just, hey, we want to get more kids involved, or we want to win a state championship, or we're looking to improve our test scores, and we do that through incentivizing working hard in the classroom and rewarding that with esports. Whatever your goal is, I think it is really important to have one, because the programs that don't are often the ones that struggle. There's this kind of like keeping up with the Joneses aspect a little bit of esports, where your neighboring district might start a program and you're like, oh man, we're falling behind. They're doing awesome things. We got to put our own program in place. And I think that those kind of schools that look at that, I often are like the ones where, hey, we rush to put in a lab, or create a program or sign up. And then, after 6 months to a year, the student participation drops off, and they're not doing as well as they did in the beginning because there wasn't kind of that North Star guiding your program. So, look and talk internally before you start. Or if you've already got a program, maybe it's a good idea to every year kind of refresh that conversation with your staff and talk about your why. So then we can actually kind of get to the physical aspect of building a program, right? And first up is, where do I create my space? We need a program, where we need a home for our program. And what does that look like? What are we able to actually do? I will tell you that there are kind of a list of core needs that come along with a physical space, but that space can be a whole bunch of different options, right? So the classroom space that you see on the board right now is a great example of it, where we've got rows of desktops lining up and are available for students to sit down and do homework at and have instruction. You saw at the beginning of the presentation, the Huntington space, that's an old theater. Bite Speed, we've helped schools set up and tear down stuff in a library or in a media center or even a cafeteria, every day because that's the space they have available. So things can look very different based on what you have available. But there is kind of that like core needs checklist that I like to go through with people. If you're part of the tech team, power and internet, those are kind of like the obvious ones, right? You want to make sure that, if we're putting a bunch of computers in this space, we turn them all on. We don't blow a fuse and kill power to half the school. You want to make sure that there are internet drops to be able to have, wired, consistent, stable internet. Some classrooms or some spaces are already set up for that. In other places, you might have to work with the electrician or the IT staff to be able to kind of make that happen. We'll talk a little bit more about infrastructure, later in the presentation, but those are definitely kind of like the two big ones to start with and make sure that, hey, power is not a concern and we've got access to internet. Those are step 1 and 2 in kind of finding a good home for your program. Next up is square footage and just like capacity, right? How many kids can I fit in the room before the fire marshal will get mad at us, right? Looking at the student interest in your programs, one of the things that a lot of people do is kind of poll their students beforehand, before executing on a facility and building things out and actually officially starting. They'll grab an email out to the student body or, a kind of survey through different means in the school to kind of see what the interest level is. What games do you play? Would you be interested in joining our esports program? Are you ready to put the time commitment in? That's a little bit more than just like sitting down and playing games. We are building like a sport essentially. And kind of taking those responses and saying, okay, wow, we've got 50 kids that want to participate. I can only fit 10 in this room. Maybe that's not the space that we want to use. Looking at kind of what the demand is going to be versus the available spaces, and kind of balancing out what's reasonable. You also want to make sure that that space is accessible. One of the biggest benefits to an esports program is the fact that you will pull students with non-traditional athletic backgrounds. And one of those reasons could be a difference in ability, right? You want to make sure that if the student in the wheelchair that wants to compete and wants to participate and hasn't had a chance yet because they can't play football or they can't play basketball, if they can get into that space and sit down at one of those stations right next to their able-bodied peer and be able to have that same experience. This is an activity that lets you do that. So looking at ADA compliance, looking at making sure that, 1 out of every 10 stations is wheelchair accessible, making sure that you're not cramming so many stuff in to where it's tough to get in and out of those rows in case of an emergency. Those are definitely things to consider. HVAC and lighting. This might be kind of like a silly thing to put on here, but I will tell you, when we built the Jamestown facility, back in 2016, we did not have a working air conditioner for that room. We were in the basement of a building. We thought, oh yeah, we don't have air, but it'll be fine. Long story short, in August in North Dakota, when it's 100 degrees outside and 80% humidity, was not super comfortable in our esports space. PCs nowadays don't throw a ton of heat, but when you put 10, 15, 20 computers in a lab and then put a student at every one and then have other kids walking around, you maybe close the door because it's noisy and you don't want to disturb people outside. It gets uncomfortable pretty quickly. So you want to make sure that you address that. And similarly in the wintertime, making sure that the heat works and that everybody's comfortable is important. Lighting wise, you see the space here at Adrian. It's nice and bright. I'm not a huge fan of fluorescent lighting, but that's what they have in this space. The Huntington space, is dark. It's got LEDs everywhere. That's kind of like the one thing that I wish they would have done differently for this one, is have it be a little bit brighter, right? They took an old theater. Theaters are typically dark, and they made do with what they have. But I am more of a fan of creating a space that matches the intentionality of what you're doing. So having either windows with diffuser shades on them or having adjustable light that you can change the temperature on, those type of things are great for a space like this because you do want to kind of um, take that area and have it not feel like mom's basement, right? You are creating a team that's going to work. You're sitting down, you're practicing, you're competing. You want the kind of area around you to match that look and feel. And lighting is a big part of that. And then the last thing on here, just kind of will this be a multi-purpose space? Probably over half of the schools that we work with will dual use their esports spaces for some type of curriculum application during the day. So whether it's CAD or Adobe or any of those kind of programs, coding, business labs, you name it. If there's going to be other classes that are using that equipment and using that space, you want to make sure that their needs are met as well as the gaming team. So looking at ways to kind of split funding between two departments, that's a great way to kind of address that and also share the benefits. But making sure that we're being mindful of who needs to use this space. Then we get to the fun part, right? What do I actually put in that space? And I think that the list of equipment and what all goes into it is a little daunting if you're starting from scratch, but we'll kind of cover the basis, give you a good floor plan, and kind of like let you run wild with kind of ideas in your brain. Before we get there, I just want to bring up one quick thing, and kind of it's Ford versus Ferrari again. I don't know if anybody's seen the movie, but this is kind of the same conversation that I'd like to keep in your brains as we go through this. Be mindful of your budget. What is a need versus what is a priority, right? I would love for everybody to be able to afford a Ferrari and be able to build out, a flagship computer with top of the line specs and fancy furniture and all these other type of things that go into a really cool esports space. But is a Ford Fusion going to get me from point A to point B for 20 years, dependably, reliably, safely, on budget? So it's kind of that balancing act, right? I think that there is a big trap in a lot of places where, schools that are trying to put in these incredible esports programs, they get sold on the idea that they need to spend tons and tons of money to be able to get a program off the ground. And the reality is you can do this on a modest budget and still have a really great end product. So balancing needs versus wants. When it comes to equipment, we got to start with infrastructure. Esports is a digital sport. We need internet access to be able to play. So having something in place is really important. But before we can even get going, most schools will have an existing internet connection that is good enough to get started. You might be thinking, oh man, Josh, like we've got hundreds of Chromebooks walking around all day and a couple other labs that are fighting for internet access. I've got staff with cell phones walking around the building all over the place. Our internet is constantly being bombarded by tons and tons and tons of traffic. The good thing about esports is a lot of times it happens after school when a lot of that traffic is not actually impacting your network. When we started the program at Jamestown, we had our own internet connection to the building that we were in, which was definitely a benefit and a boon. But the connection was only 500 gigabytes, or 500 meg, excuse me. It was only, a little bit better than like your standard home internet when we got started. And we had 15 machines on that 500 meg connection, and it worked. All right. It was serviceable. The kids had a great experience. And we didn't run into a lot of issues when it came to internet. When we expanded the program and added more machines and more students, we did eventually move it to a gig for internet. But when we started, it was a pretty modest connection speeds. Most schools have better than 500 meg internet. Now, not everybody does, but a lot do. So you don't need to go overboard when getting started, and it might be something that you address in year 2 or year 3 if the experience for your students is not up to snuff. Some of the gold standards on the networking side, kind of creating a separate VLAN, a separate network to be able to put those machines onto. Important because your firewall is going to be different, permissions and the access is going to be different on those computers versus the standard business lab that they're doing Word and Excel projects on, right? So kind of having a separate batch of policies that you can apply to those machines and manage them in a little different way than your standard labs. Always shoot for a wired connection over Wi-Fi. Wired is going to be better to manage or easier to manage. If you've ever had, 30 Chromebooks in one classroom, all trying to fight over the same AP, that gets bogged down quickly. And when speed and the smoothness of your connection matters so greatly in esports, having that stable wired connection is going to be really, really important. And it's going to give you a better experience overall. And then finally, you want to look at like an update strategy. The game of basketball has had the same rules for 20 years, right? Relatively. Esports gets new rule changes and updates every like week or every 2 weeks. It's very common for a patch or an update to come through, and you'll have to download that update before you can launch the game and actually play. So if it's 3:45, the kids are sitting down, turning on the machines. We've got a game at 4 o'clock. We're trying to warm up, and then there's a 10 gig update to Fortnite or something like that. If I've got to update 5 machines or 6 machines to wait to be able to even launch the game, we might not be starting our match on time. So coming up with a strategy of either doing updates in the off hours or looking at like a caching solution to be able to kind of speed things up. Those are good conversations to have. Every school is going to do their infrastructure a little bit differently. It's kind of up to the comfort level of the network admin and kind of the general policies of the school itself. But these are conversations that you need to have before we even talk about hardware. Next up is devices. So most of the esports stuff happens on PC. There is some console stuff that will happen, and we'll talk about here in a second. But the majority of titles are played on computers. And what titles you're playing and what the minimum roster size is for those games will determine, how many devices that you need. Most of the kind of most popular team esports are 5-on-5. So Overwatch, League of Legends, Valorant, Rainbow Six Siege, all of those games are 5-on-5. Rocket League is only 3-on-3. So yeah, you would need less machines to start a Rocket League team than you would an Overwatch team. And then Marvel Rivals came in and gave us 6-on-6 again. So now we're, something that I need to update the slide for. But now we're looking at 6 machines as kind of being the minimum you would need to play everything. And this kind of goes back to that first, kind of thought of, we polled our students, what games are you interested in? Maybe you don't offer all of the titles out there, but you offer most of them and can get away with 5 or 3 or, you name it. I will say most of the schools that we work with will start with kind of 10 computers, 10 to 12 computers. And the reason for that is kind of being able to have 2 teams play against each other in practice and scrimmage each other and kind of have that same feel that you would see in a basketball practice, right? Your starters versus your bench or your JV, doing drills, playing against each other. The same kind of thought process works for esports. You'd have, your two teams play against each other. If we're going to do rivals, we need 6 machines for each team. 12 is the magic number. Um, but like I said, that's the average. If your budgets are tight, you can look at doing a smaller deployment and kind of growing things over time. But our kind of national average is right around 10 to 12 machines. On the spec side, what actually goes inside the computers, most of the titles out there are pretty well optimized, which definitely helps because we don't need rocket ships, we don't need Ferraris, we need Ford Fusions, right? So at Bytespeed, when we look at quoting out a system, configuring it for esports, we'll kind of like look at what's the bare minimum to run the game, and then kind of plan for the future and get a happy balance between the two. So some example builds here. A lot of the systems that we sell to schools are this entry level machine. It's an i5 or Ryzen 5 processor, 16 gigs of RAM, a terabyte for storage, and then something like a 5060 for a graphics card. Something that's on the entry level side for a physical GPU, but it's not breaking the bank, right? And then you look at standard heat sinks, no fancy water cooling or anything like that. And then like a 750-watt gold power supply, something that's going to be dependable, reliable, and that configuration will run most esports titles no problem. Now, you're not going to crank the settings up to ultra. You're not going to turn on all the shaders and all of the fancy ray tracing and those type of things, but you'll put this at competition settings and have a great experience. If you've got a little bit more in the budget, or you're looking at doing content creation or pairing it with those academic programs that might need a little bit more juice, then we'd maybe shift over to the mid-tier system, something like an i7 or a Ryzen 7 on the AMD side. Probably at this point in time, bumping it to 32 gigs of RAM, keeping the storage the same, and then jumping up a level in the video card, either a 5060 Ti or a 5070. And then kind of keeping the cooling the same. Nowadays the aftermarket big fan heat sinks do a great job. But then maybe like bumping up the power supply to 1,000 watt, especially because the higher end GPUs are so much more power hungry than they used to be. 1,000 watt. Anytime we go to that kind of mid tier system, it's nice to have the extra room and go to that 1,000 watt power supply. This system is going to be able to run all the titles out there, be able to do the more taxing stuff, be able to stream, be able to work on video editing and CAD and those type of programs that you might need a little bit more horsepower in the background. On the peripheral side of things, when we talk about displays, and I've got a fun exercise here in a second, at 24 inches, 144 hertz, that's the gold standard for gaming. Looking at something that's a high refresh rate, good aspect ratio, and just like a solid gaming monitor. Your keyboards and mice, look for stuff that's mechanical. They're more responsive. You can customize them. They're more durable generally than like your standard Logitech mouse and keyboard that's real flimsy. And they will give you a better experience, and it doesn't have to break the bank, right? Excuse me. The other thing with the headsets, looking for something that's over the ear and it has a microphone. It doesn't necessarily have to be noise canceling. I think that's a little bit of a misnomer. Noise canceling headphones cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. You just need something that's over the ear so you can kind of isolate that sound and not be distracted by what else is happening in the room. Peripherals do not have to break the bank. You can get great mechanical keyboards and mice and a decent headset, all for around $50 a piece. In some cases, even cheaper than that. A good quality gaming monitor, $200 to $250, is right in the sweet spot of kind of what you should be looking for. The other thing on monitors is kind of like looking at the refresh rate, timing, kind of what actually is the biggest difference between moving from a standard like office monitor to a gaming one. Normally when I do this presentation in kind of a live session, we'll go through and I'll have everybody guess what the differences are. So your 60 hertz monitor is showing a new frame, refreshing that frame every 16 and a half milliseconds. Sounds kind of fast, but if you've ever tried to play on a 60 hertz monitor, it is a tough experience. There's screen tearing, there's stuttering, and the monitor just can't keep up with the computer. So jumping up to 144 hertz, again, that's kind of like the gold standard for gaming. We've more than doubled our speed, going down to roughly 7, right? And that's where 99 times out of 100, that's where we need to be. And that's all the higher end that we need to go. At the collegiate level and some of the most competitive programs, we are starting to see folks kind of trend towards 240 hertz. But again, there's some diminishing returns here where you're spending about the same to jump from 60 to 144, from 144 to 240. But the gain that we're getting for that $100 jump in price is only about 2 milliseconds. So not nearly as dramatic, not nearly as big of a bump in performance as the 60 hertz one to a 144. And then at the top end right now, at 360, again, less than 2 milliseconds faster for another $125. So most of the schools that we work with, 99 deployments out of 100 have that 144 hertz monitor. And that is a great, great spot to be in for gaming. Then we get to consoles. The most popular being Nintendo Switch. Super Smash Brothers, Mario Kart, Splatoon, those games that are only played on a Nintendo console. The model right now that I recommend everybody look into is the Switch OLED. It's the previous generation console, but for right now, it's definitely the cheaper of the two. And I'll talk about Switch 2 in a second. These are roughly $350. And will let you play 3 of the most popular titles out there. And your students will be able to jump in right away, excuse me, and be able to have an esports program, right? Consoles are definitely like the budget-friendly option to get things started. When we look at kind of overall cost of a desktop solution, so your tower, keyboard, mouse, monitor, headset, all those things that we just talked about. I usually tell folks about $2,000 to set up is what you want to budget for. A lot of times you'll come in under that, but it's kind of like the nice round number to be able to go to your superintendent or your school board and say, hey, we need to start esports. We're looking at 5 computers. I need $10,000. That can be a lot for some schools. So looking at the console side of things and saying, hey, our classroom already has a smart board or a big TV. If I spend $350 and get a console, a couple extra controllers for 60, $70 a pop, boom, we've got an esports program. We can build that proof of concept. And then, after we've got 40 kids pounding on the door saying, hey, we want to play, you can take that ammunition and go to your school board or your admin again and say, hey, the use case is there. We need to expand this. So looking at ways to kind of take the Switch, especially, and kind of build your kind of fledgling program around a console is a great way to get started. One thing I will say is that you'll want to come up with a storage solution. A Switch especially is designed to be picked up and taken on the go. You don't want those things growing legs and following a student home in a backpack or something like that. So having something that's like a lockable storage cabinet or a permanent kind of like stand or a display rack that you can have things in connected to whatever TV or display that you're using is a good thing to kind of keep in mind. The other thing that you need for your kind of console setup with Nintendo is an online subscription. I think these are like the most budget friendly one is like 20 or $30 a year. And you've got access to online play to be able to connect with other schools. It's per Switch account or per Nintendo account. So if you've got multiple consoles that need to have online access at the same time, you want to look at getting like the family subscription or a multiple single ones. And there's kind of a good package where you can have, I think the family subscription is like up to 4 devices, and it could be more. I haven't looked at it recently. But it is kind of like a nice bundle, so there is some cost savings there. Switch 2 came out in July of this year, and there are a lot of changes with this console, most of them for the better. Uh, the one change that definitely is seen right up front is that it had some good performance changes. The hardware for the Switch 2 is a lot better than the stuff for the Switch 1. Docked, it'll do 120 frames. You'll have a much better experience playing games. And for Smash Ultimate, especially, there was some good kind of performance bumps that make that experience a lot smoother and more consistent. This does come with a price tag change, though. This is $450 instead of the Switch OLED, which is $350. So $100 more for the new model, but backwards compatible with all the software that we've been talking about. So you can play all those Switch OLED games on a Switch 2, have the newest hardware. And there is now mouse support and a couple of changes to the online experience. So it is something that I think long term we'll see programs slowly switch to. But for right now, Switch OLED is still going to be all you need to get started. If you've got the extra $100, Switch 2 is a good investment. The other thing that programs are kind of starting to look into, kind of more on the budget friendly side, as kind of an in between from a console to a full blown desktop setup, is handhelds. So Bytespeed, we're a big Lenovo partner. So the Legion Go and the Legion Go S are kind of like the two standard offerings that we have for a gaming handheld. And these things are actually really cool. It's a Windows device that is portable and on the go like a Switch, but it can be docked for some nice performance benefits and kind of a more kind of similar gaming experience to that of a traditional desktop. So the Legion Goes, good specs overall. It's a Windows device, like I said. Integrated graphics that do a good job of keeping up with the esports titles, especially. Up to 32 gigs of RAM, tons of storage. And docked, this thing will actually do 4K 60, 1440p at 120 hertz. A really good option to be able to get decent performance for a under budget kind of option. Great thing about the dock is it's got USB ports to be able to plug in your peripherals. So technically you could have a Legion Go, a mouse, a keyboard, and a headset all connected to the dock, a monitor hooked up with an HDMI cable. And then, you've got kind of like a pseudo PC setup, for roughly half the cost. Still going to be about $1,000, maybe a little bit more. But if you're pinching pennies and looking for a good way to get started and kind of, again, build that proof of concept, this could be a great option for you. Other things, talking Lenovo wise, mobile gaming, if you would have asked me when I started at Bytespeed 7 years ago, I would have said, run the other direction. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. We've made a lot of improvements in the last 5 years, especially on how well gaming laptops do. There's lots of different configuration options. They're great for dual using, for classroom stuff and for gaming. And if you don't have a permanent home for your program, I talked about the example of like, hey, we've helped the school set up and tear down in a cafeteria every day. They're using laptops to do that because they don't have a permanent physical space to put a desktop lab in. So they're using laptops on a cart, just like a Chromebook cart, but definitely beefier spec laptops. My daily driver, the machine I'm using right now, is one of these Legion 5 laptops. I will say the one kind of like, there's a couple of benefits just from a standard hardware side of things, right? Laptop comes with a high refresh rate screen. It's not 24 inches wide. Mine is 16. But it is 144 hertz. So it is kind of that same speed, just a smaller size, which is nice. All laptops come with a keyboard, so you don't need to buy that. So you're looking at a mouse and a headset and a laptop, and you've got what you need to play those PC titles. The one thing that I would like to mention as kind of like a caveat to mobile laptop gaming is that battery life and power are still going to be something you need to think about. Under load, playing like an actual, like, if I tried to play a Valorant game on my laptop, it might last at full battery. It might last long enough to get one match in, right? Um, Anytime you throw a GPU or graphics card into a laptop, the battery life is going to suffer dramatically. So you might have like a standard laptop that lasts all day. A gaming laptop might last an hour or two. So making sure that you can have that plugged in, that big AC adapter plugged into the wall, or a cart that has a charging bank to it, is still going to be a limiting factor, especially if you're going to try and get a match going and have the machine run for an entire 2 hours. You're probably not going to get there just on battery life alone. Next up on kind of the what do I put in my space, we talk about furniture. Comfort, style, accessibility. Those are the big things for this. Um, I mentioned storage before, looking at ways to store laptops or consoles, or even just like extra peripherals or bags or other things that the kids bring in. Like looking at ways to kind of add color and branding to your space, make it feel like you're walking into the basketball arena, right? When you do that, you walk into your gym, you see school logos everywhere, school colors everywhere, championship banners, all this kind of like uh, uh, all this marketing is like bombarding you when you walk into a space like that. And your esports program can have that same look and feel. Being able to really show that the school took it seriously and built out a space that the kids can be proud of. But also, we just talked about laptops, fulfilling those charging requirements, keeping all the equipment safe and locked and accounted for, and keeping the space clear of book bags and all these other things that the kids bring in. For the gaming station, again, we mentioned ADA compliance at the very beginning. Looking at accessibility of a space, furniture is a great way to bring that into play. Having height adjustable desks or wheelchair ready desks of various sizes and colors and shapes. The biggest thing for desks and chairs is you want to look at ergonomics. You want to be able to sit level with your arms kind of bent at a 45-degree angle. As I drop my pointer, hold on one sec. Sorry about that. You want your arms at a 45-degree angle, resting comfortably, having lumbar and back and neck support. That's really great. Having those chairs be adjustable for different size and shapes of students. And then having the desks be wide enough and have a usable surface to where, like, if I'm playing Valorant and I really am like an arm shoulder move aimer instead of just like using my wrist, I need that space to be able to swing my arm and not bump into my neighbor or hit the tower that's sitting on top of the desk. So looking at those type of things. We generally shoot for 44 inches wide by 30 inches deep. That's kind of like a great size to shoot for your desks. You can, in some cases, get away with a little bit smaller or a little bit less wide. I think the lowest that we go is 36 by 30, but 44 inches wide is kind of like the gold standard. And there's tons of options out there for this. We're a partner with Spectrum Industries out of Wisconsin. They do an awesome job, especially when you look at building stuff that's going to last, be worth your investment, but also look really cool and serve all those functions together. The other thing on the furniture side of things you might want to look at is shoutcasting. So like, having those students do the ESPN broadcast for the game, work in front of a camera and be able to stream and commentate and do those types of things. Having a station it's built out for that. Maybe it's got monitors sunk into the desk or on arms that can be moved out of the way. Having that nice school logo and branding right front and center. These are definitely like nice to haves, and not everybody does this right away, but something to kind of shoot for long term as you're building out your space. Okay, we've got just about 15 minutes left, technically in the hour, but we're getting towards the end of the presentation here. You might be thinking to yourself, Josh, this all sounds great, but how the heck do I pay for all this stuff? It sounds expensive. Um, there are a ton of different ways to budget for esports. The goal should be an annual sustainable budget that you can count on every single year. It can come from athletics. It could come from IT. It could come from the Department of Underwater Basket Weaving. It doesn't matter, right? But you should think of esports like the basketball team, like the football team, like the band, like the choir, like the theater. Though they all have, in most cases, an annual budget that they get every year to support what they're doing. It should be the same for esports. Not everybody starts at that point, though. So, to help you get started, a lot of programs do rely on grant writing to get going. Um, Looking at kind of like the dual use case of, hey, we have really nice equipment that can do more than just play games. There are tons of STEM and CTE style grants out there that we've seen schools get funds for to start their esports programs because that hardware is used for curriculum during the day. So Carl Perkins, huge pot of money. Every state has access to huge way to get an esports program off the ground if you're building out a CTE lab or something like that. That's been definitely the most popular. If you take anything away from today, copy the link on the screen here in the middle, bytespeed.com/grant writing tips. We've got a really good page set up that has a ton of different funding sources, and that will give you kind of like a bank to scroll through and say, okay, hey, we might qualify for this one, or we might qualify for that one. Definitely a good site to kind of bookmark if you're looking at grants. Supplemental funding can come from fundraising, stuff like E-Team sponsor. That's something that I did as a college athlete, a decade ago. Every year we do an E-Team sponsor. Josh goes to grandma, grandpa, friend, aunt, uncle, neighbor, whoever. Hey, you want to give me $5, $5. And then all of a sudden I bring $200 back to the program, kind of doing that crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, t-shirt sales, apparel sales, building out a team store for your esports program. There are some clothing vendors out there that will kind of do this for you. So, you go and design your esports jersey, get that all figured out, and then they'll put that same design on a sweatshirt or on joggers or whatever. And then members of your community can buy from that store, get gear to support your team, and then a portion of those sales goes back to you as the program. And then looking at like equipment raffles, other things to get creative. One of my favorite fundraising stories, we worked with a school in Illinois that Marvin, who's the tech director there, and he teaches the middle school computer science class. And this kind of early on in their esports program, he took that 8th grade computer science class and they built an arcade cabinet with a Raspberry Pi and a couple other things. Had the wood shop kind of build them a frame. They did all the coding and the construction of it. And then they raffled that arcade cabinet off for, hey, buy $5 gets you one ticket, $25 gets you six, or whatever it was, right? They raised like a few $1,000s. This small rural school in the middle of Illinois. And that helped, bump up their budget for the next year to be able to get some new hardware. And part of that was from that class project that he did with his 8th graders to help kind of boost the esports program. And then the last thing here on the fundraising side, sponsors and partnerships. This inevitably always comes up. And what I will say is start local. A company like Bytespeed, may or may not have ever heard of your school before, or might not have ties to your program. National companies, I think, are getting hit up every single day by tons of schools. They're getting the same ask. And so a lot of times they can't say yes to everybody. So they say no in lieu of that. But your your local businesses, your booster clubs, your community organizations that are already supporting the school, already helping, the students in the community. Those are great people to talk to. And maybe it's not like, hey, I need 20 grand to build out our lab, but maybe it's, hey, would you put, your Frank's Plumbing logo on the sleeve of my jersey? And we'll get you like a banner ad for the Twitch stream, and you give us $1,000 and we'll do some advertising for you. And that way we can pay for the jerseys. Or, you go to the hardware store and ask, hey, like, do you have scrap wood that you can donate that we can like, stain and put and turn into like nicer desks? There's lots of different ways to work with the community, to build out solutions for your program. Um, and I think you'll find a lot more success than like writing an email to a no-name company that is based in New York or Los Angeles or something, and saying, "Hey, we're starting esports, sponsor us." Chances are you're going to have way better success going to the Booster Club or the Lions Club or the Rotary Club or whoever, and saying, "Hey, these are our students. This is what they're interested in. Could you help us out in a small way?" And that's all I got, guys. The QR code on screen here, if you take your phone and scan that, it'll pull up my dot card profile. You can save my contact information there. You can book a meeting with my Microsoft booking link on there if you want to talk about your school individually. Lots of great resources and ways to connect on that QR code. We've got about 9 minutes before the Zoom closes officially. Does anybody have any questions? Remember that the chat and the Q&A function are both live. I can hang out for a couple minutes and answer any questions that you have. Otherwise, just thanks so much for joining us this morning, and we'll look to send out that recording here later today or early tomorrow, so that you can watch it on YouTube. If you are watching the recording on YouTube, thanks. Make sure you drop your question in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel so you get notified whenever we post new webinar recordings. And we'd love to help get your program off the ground. So thanks so much for joining. And again, make sure you connect with us if you have questions. Okay. Yeah, doesn't look like there's anything coming through the Q&A. So Brad, Thomas, thanks for hanging out. You guys are the last ones here, so appreciate your time today. Have a good week, a good Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in the next webinar.